Good morning to the members of the media and our viewing public. Welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition's press conference for June 30th, 2022. Today on our panel, we have no other than the Leader of the Opposition and Leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Mr. Aubrey Norton, Member of Parliament. Also on the panel is the Regional Representative for Region Number 2, Mr. Sherwin Holder, Member of Parliament, and also economist Mr. Elson Lowe. Welcome to our panel today. As is customary, today our press statement will be read and it will be followed by questions from the media. Today's press statement will be read by the Leader of the Opposition.
Good morning. The Golden Grove demonstrations. Tuesday's protest on the East Coast Demerara has re-exposed several serious problems with the state of our country, namely, 1, the dire crisis in the country's overall governance, 2, the loss of confidence by citizens in the Guyana's police force and the system of justice, 3, the public skepticism towards the promises made by the government and the police force, 4, the inadequacies of police crowd control operations, and 5, the ease with which a few rogue or rented persons can turn an orderly mass protest into the kind of mayhem we saw the day of the Monrepo market. It is also opposite to note that the PPP is provoking people into protest mode so that they can shift attention away from the damning allegations of corruption and bribery associated with Second Vice President Jack Deo. Guyanese are urged not to be browbeaten and continue the call for the Vice President to resign or be removed from office to clear the way for an impartial investigation. We all must be focused. The PPP knows that it is unpopular and an installed regime. It clearly is provoking the people of our country so that there is unrest, so that they can instigate ethnic tension. Ethnic tension serves the interests of the corrupt, incompetent, and divisive Ali Jack Deo regime. There is clear evidence that there is conspiracy among the PPP, government, the hierarchy of the Guyana police force, and the GDF to push Guyana into an era of instability so that they can govern through the use of force. That the present acting commissioner of police was appointed in violation of the Constitution of Guyana, and both he and the present acting head of the GDF have been previously fingered in alleged torture of Guyanese, should send the signal that the PPP is reassembling a machinery for repression and extrajudicial killings that is intent on violating the rights of the Guyanese people. This cannot be and will not be encouraged. First, as we stated in our statement on Tuesday, and I quote, though these protests are linked directly to the police execution of Quindon Bacchus, the outpouring of persons on the streets is driven by the deep, persistent grievances many Guyanese feel in the light of PPP discrimination and bad governance, unquote. The PPP foolhardily believes that Guyanese ignore its many acts of discrimination, power grabbing, corruption, and cronyism. Guyanese do not. They will not forget or overlook such PPP acts as, for example, the stemming of investigation into the death of the Henrys, Harry Singh, and Orrin Boston, and the eventual placing of them on the back burner to protect row cops, as in the case in the Boston murder. 2, the attempts to impose an IMC on the Linen Utility Services Co-op Society Limited. 3, the motion on the PAC to stymie scrutiny of the people's money under this regime. 4. The pretense that all is well at GECOM and that comprehensive electoral reforms are not needed, despite calls from the CARICOM Observers Mission, among others, for fresh registration from scratch. 5. The continued two-Guyana policy towards allocation of funds to the NDCs and RDCs, whereby opposition-led councils are discriminated against. 6. The unconstitutional appointment of Acting Police Commissioner Clifton Hickin and the Commissioners of the Teacher Service Commission, the Integrity Commission, and Police Service Commission. 7. The reluctance of the PPPC to implement adequate relief measures to deal with the continuing rising cost of living. 8. The enrichment of the PPP elite friends and families at the expense of the Guyanese taxpayers. 9. The Sugate allegation of bribery, corruption, and the abuse of public office swirling around VP Jack Deo and other government ministers. The list goes on and on. These acts and others not only reek of bad governance, but they also severely damage the nation's social contract and depress people's hopes and spirit. If left unchecked and unchallenged, the country will plunge further into a crisis in governance at a time when the blessings of oil wealth should be inspiring national optimism and people-centered development as being advocated by the opposition. Second, the police handling of the investigations in the murder of the Henry boys, Harris Singh and Orrin Boston, have caused many to lose faith in our law enforcement and justice system. The long-standing operational deficiencies of the Guyana Police Force have now been exacerbated by the direct meddling in and politicization of the force by the PPP. We only recently sounded the alarm over the growing phenomenon of PPP condoned roguism in the Guyana Police Force, where some elements of the force function in collaboration with the PPP and at the personal level outside and above the law. Quindon Bacchus tragically is the latest victim of this police roguism. The APNU AFC demands that the accused be treated as a murder suspect and not as a rank who is facing a routine disciplinary matter. Enough time has passed for murder charges to be laid and for the accused to face the full brunt of the law. The family of Quindon Bacchus deserves justice. Third, the indiscriminate firing of pellets and bullets by police into the crowds must stop. Apart from being an excessive and callous use of force and unnecessarily injuring and terrorizing citizens, it is also ineffective and even counterproductive. The Guyana Police Force must use modern crowd control equipment and techniques to ensure demonstrations remain peaceful and lawful. 4. As we stated Tuesday last, while we reaffirmed the right of citizens to engage in peaceful protest in their fight for justice, liberty, and equality, we condemn all acts of violence and criminality. Such acts only serve to undermine and distract from the legitimate aims of the protest actions. Many of these marauders or looters are directed by the PPP and their political agents with the aim of damaging the legitimacy of the protests. The police must be preemptive and strategic in thwarting their efforts. We support the decision to compensate all who are affected by the acts of banditry at Monrepo and other places for their loss of property and business assets. We also call on the government to compensate those people who had their property shut up by the Guyana Police Force and those vendors who policemen drank out their drinks and other beverages in Golden Grove. They need compensation as well if it is one Guyana. We take this opportunity to call on the government to also assist the persons with a monetary resettlement grant whose roadside business stalls it intends to bulldoze, though we prefer them to not be bulldozed. It is unfortunate the government is returning to the ropes and bend fail approach. Lastly, all Guyanese must condemn the threat to the president's life regardless of the circumstances and urge the government to act to ensure all Guyanese can live free from fear, including the opposition. 2. Jagdeo and the PPP have broken the social contract with the Guyanese people. The Sugate bribery and corruption allegations encircling VP Jagdeo and other ministers are by themselves matters of crisis proportions. We and others have rightly called for a full independent investigation and to allow the law to take its course. However, the Sugate affair has also raised another crisis of similar proportion. The crisis concerns the huge loss of public trust and confidence in VP Jagdeo as a member of the government. His continued role as puppet master in the Ali administration undermines the social contract between government and the Guyanese citizens. Social contracts govern several relations in a society, including, most importantly, between the people and their government. It defines what is expected from the government by the people. It establishes the legitimacy of authority and the state over the people. It expresses the general will of people, their collective interests, and provides the basis for ensuring the general welfare of the people. A social contract enables the rule of law. It is what keeps society from destabilizing and disintegrating. When those entrusted to govern break the contract through corruption, incompetence, discrimination, and lawlessness, society faces a crisis. When those entrusted to govern break the contract by no longer seeking consensus, society faces a crisis. When those entrusted to govern break the contract through careless power grabbing, society faces a crisis. When those who govern have to use force, the society faces a crisis. That is the crisis situation we find ourselves in Guyana today under Jagdeo and the PPP. The revelations in Vice News features have caused the public to no longer trust any major transaction or agreements by the government, especially those in which VP Jagdeo played a part, whether from the office or from his living room, whether with sue or without sue. The social contract in Guyana today lies in ruins under the PPP. To restore the public trust as part of the social contract, governments or ministers normally resign. It is in that context too we call on VP Jagdeo to step down. Jagdeo must go. For the PPP to pretend that the public confidence in its integrity and decency has not now dissipated is a classic case of the ostrich burying its head in the sand. Tighter rules required for auctioning of oil blocks. Many Guyanese were legitimately alarmed when they heard Sue say in the Vice documentary, and I quote, "Other amounts of money before this has been much bigger, like the oil company." Sue's allegation that bribes were paid in connection with an oil contract raises a series of questions, in particular whether the upcoming auction of oil blocks in Guyana is a sham, with winners already chosen because they have already paid the so-called consultation fees to government ministers. Our national assets, worth billions of US, are now going not to the highest bidder, but the highest briber. Guyanese must recall that this is not the first time that we have seen the award of blocks under the PPP mired in controversy. That prompted public outcry, investigations, and led to lawsuits. This dark cloud of suspicion, which now hovers over the proposed auction of Guyana's remaining oil blocks, will not dissipate until an impartial investigation has taken place. There should be no auction without an investigation into these claims, as well as the implementation of several measures to improve transparency and accountability during this process. At minimum, the auction of national oil blocks must include: 1. Clear criteria as to the minimum requirements any applicant must satisfy. 2. Extensive due diligence to ensure each applicant meets the minimum requirements. 3. Clear criteria as to how winning bidders will be selected. 4. If multiple rounds of bidding take place, clear rules as to how this will occur. 5. A period of national consultation to determine if the rules and criteria laid out are appropriate and acceptable to the Guyanese people. We reiterate our call for civil society and the international community to join the push for an impartial investigation into the numerous allegations of bribery in the wake of the Vice News documentary. We reiterate our call for him to step aside or be fired in order to facilitate such an investigation. This is not a light matter. Tens of billions of US dollars of our people money are on the line. It is not Jack Dew's money. It is not the government's money. It is the people's money. No oil block auction should take place under the present corrupt circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Leader. At this time, I will take questions on the statement from members of the media, and as customary, you will show by the raise of hand and state your name and media house. I see the hand of Mr. Adam Harris. You can go ahead and mute your mic.
Good morning,
Mute your mic, sorry.
An interesting development. 24 hours or so after the people of Monaco claimed that they were attacked and they lost so much, the government began to make compensation without even an assessment of the extent of the loss. How can you explain this?
First of all, I believe that what occurred is as a result of PPP's actions. This is not the first time. Once there is protest, the PPP has the tendency to place within the protests agents provocateurs who end up in that direction. In previous protests years ago, we had the task of identifying many of them and putting them in the hands of the police, though nothing will become of them once they know they are agents provocateurs of the PPP. And so you would note, though I believe in protests, we were doing a lot of work to be able to ensure that when protests occurs, there are mechanisms, when protests occur, there are mechanisms to deal with it. Now in this case, what in essence happened is the police action itself generated problems. Like we said in the statement, they need to have more modern methods and proper methods of dealing with control. Having said that, the People's Progressive Party has adopted a policy of distributing this nation resources without mechanisms for accountability and transparency. And so it is in keeping with what the PPP does. I don't think the PPP is interested in assessing losses, in ensuring that the people who get are the people who should get. The PPP make the position that once they perceive it's their supporters, they will just issue money. And that explains a lot of what the PPP is doing. Let us not forget, it's not only in this case they're doing it, it has become a policy of the government that where they believe there is opportunity for them to develop some popularity, they will dole out the nation's money and hope to gain political advantage from it. While we believe that there is need for a structured system to ensure resources meet our people, we are fully well aware that the PPP like this approach because it allows for squandermania and corruption. And if you didn't do a proper inventory of the people who are affected and how much it would have cost them, and then you just go and dole out money, at the end of the day you can say, well, we spent 40 million when we spent 2 or 3, and the PPP elite will enjoy itself on corruption money. That approach of corrupt activity, that approach has become interwoven into the fabric of the PPP mode of operation. And so I just see it as one, yes, people need to be compensated, but two, every time opportunities for compensation emerge, the PPP uses it as an opportunity for corruption.
Thank
And
you.
sir, sorry, is there any way that this could be investigated at the level of the National Assembly, for example? Is there any forum available to the opposition to check these expenditures, to monitor these expenditures? This money turns up. What is the source of this money? Did it come from the public treasury? I don't know, so I'm asking.
Well, there are mechanisms. Questions could be asked in Parliament. When the time comes and it comes before the Public Accounts Committee, it could be scrutinized. But you know they are doing everything to ensure that their accounts are not scrutinized by the Public Accounts Committee. We anticipate when it comes to those, the ministers wouldn't turn up. Remember, they changed the law to ensure that they must be present. And so there are avenues, but in the final analysis, it will take some time. You will have to ask questions and then get answers and move forward. And like I said, the Public Accounts Committee could be one area that is utilized.
Thank you. Any other questions on the press statement?
Yes, I would like to ask. You called for compensation for the people at Golden Grove, sir. What is the likelihood of those people being compensated for whatever loss or damage they suffered?
If we judge from the historical practice of the Ali regime, there's little or no hope. The PPP seems to only believe that they should focus on those who they perceive to be their supporters. I was at Golden Grove last night, and you saw that they shot up at one shop, and you know it is not only pellets, that they use live round when you see it. I think we took some pictures. Vendors complained that the police having fired at them and thing them. The policemen then took their cards, carried away their drinks, had a spree on those activities, and that is why in the press statement we call for the people there to be compensated, because a number of people at one shop in the market, they shot and broke up the windows. And so what the police did was to spread mayhem, and then they begin to occupy the village. Let us recall that since the police went in to quell the protests at Dartmouth, they have not moved out of Dartmouth. They are still there. The other thing that needs to be questioned, and I am going to look at it in the law, I do not know that the army needs to be present when these activities are occurring. I see the presence of the army as an attempt to intimidate. And so one has to look very carefully at what the PPP is doing. One would have thought that the police force has the capabilities to deal with these issues. And as I understand the law, only if the police declare that they do not have the capacity to deal with it, then they will withdraw and then the army will come. But we are seeing state repression. The police is bringing the army out to intimidate people. And this becomes easy at this stage because the acting head of the army previously, and we note this in the statement, there were serious allegations of torture made against him. There were serious allegations that he was in collusion with the People's Progressive Party. And I believe those alone should disqualify him from acting as the head of the Ghana Defense Force. The politicization of the police force and the Ghana Defense Force cannot be something that is welcome in this society. And so the behavior is a reflection of what is encouraged by the PPP. Let us see what is encouraged. When the Harish Singh and Henry Boyce case emerged, the PPP didn't proceed to investigate it thoroughly and properly. They were doing everything to affect the investigation, and even when foreigners came to help, they did everything to not assist the delegation. And then many people in the society are of the view that the people they placed before the court were not the people who were involved, and so you will have a kind of a kangaroo type court dealing with that case. Then we come to the Boston case, where they had made all kinds of pronouncement that the man had a weapon, etc. It turned out that the man was shot in his bed. They did everything to quell the protests, and until like today, this matter is not heard and will not be heard in a hurry, knowing the PPP's approach. We come now to the Bacchus case, and we see the first thing they said was a complete lie. Video and other evidence suggested that the young man was pursued and executed. Now, in this case, they know who was the executioner. Explain to us then why, if a man is murdered, you are going to put it in the police complaints authority or some other agency. This is a criminal matter that should be investigated as murder. Had it been any other body, or somebody who is not linked to the PPP regime, or carries out the dirty work of the PPP, or is covered by the lawlessness of the PPP, that person would have been in prison. But we see the man having a nice time, lying in good comfort, while the family of Bacchus would like to have justice. And so it is the actions and the operations of the People's Progressive Party and the police force they control that those are the actions that are creating the problems we have in the society. And so the people in this country anticipated that they're going down the same road as they went before, and that, among other things, resulted in the protest. There's little or no hope that these matters will be dealt with in keeping with law.
Thank you. At this time, we'll take questions outside of the statement if the media has any.
Mr. Norton, you were recently in the United States. Would you care to share some of the details of that visit?
Well, basically the visit was more or less restricted to me working with our support base around the United States. Essentially that was it. We engaged in 2 states in the United States with business people, with people who support the APNU, AFC and the PNC, and with the membership of the PNC in the diaspora. What was concerning was the reports that the PPP now have in the United States at least one member of the Guyana Defense Force who is monitoring Guyanese there and operating in a way that suggests the government is not only spying on us in Guyana, but they have gone outside of the jurisdiction to spy on our people. Clearly, a police state is emerging here, and they seem to be setting up arms of it in jurisdictions where Guyanese people are active and believe that the government is an improper government practicing bad governance.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, sorry. You can tell me a little more about this person or faction that is doing this spying, sir. What is his modus operandi? How is he going about this?
Well, people in the United States have observed that he's always present at their activity. He's always seeking to get information, and even in places that he shouldn't be, he turns up, and many of them have confirmed that he's on the payroll of the Guyana Defense Force, and therefore it is obvious to them that he's not just a visitor of ordinary standing, he is part of the spy network that the PPP would have set up. In fact, there are those who believe it's more than one, and the process has begun to identify others who are involved.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Good morning, Mr. Norton. Blake Rambander from the Starbuck News. About your visit to the U.S., a few weeks or days ago, there was a letter in the newspaper suggesting that you would have met with officials from ExxonMobil on one of your visits in the U.S. I'm just trying to see if that is true, and if it is, what was the meeting about?
First of all, I've answered this question before, and I'll answer it again. No, I didn't.
Thank you.
No.
You have a follow-up? Okay. Any other questions? All right. I don't see any hands being raised. At this point, we will then bring the press conference to an end. I do hope that you had a wonderful month, as today is the last day of the month. We do hope that you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Do have a good day.